Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to this is the Signum University Summer Update 2023. Good to see everybody around here. So I wanted to let you guys know what is going on at Signum University right now, because we are in the middle of a very, very exciting thing that I am excited to explain to you guys. So the first thing that I want to spend a little bit of time remembering here this evening, because this is very much an occasion for looking back at where we've come from and what Signum University has been doing over the last 10 years. I can talk over the whole 10 years, but where are we? So all right, so the thing that is going on, we are coming towards the end of our credentialing process. Now, for those of you who are relatively new to Signum University, that might not sound, I mean, that still sounds like kind of a big deal, right? But for those of you who have been with us from the beginning, you know exactly how big of a deal that is and how long and hard we have been working on this for the last more than 10 years now, since we began. Let me begin with a little bit of orientation. Right, here's orientation first. We're right now in the process of applying for accreditation. And a lot of people misunderstand accreditation. There's a lot of things that most people just don't understand about how university accreditation works. Accreditation, for one thing, is not a government review. Accreditation is run by private organizations, generally private nonprofit organizations, who do all of the evaluating and reviewing themselves for accreditation. Governments are not directly involved in that. They are indirectly involved, governments, in two ways. Number one is that state approval and authorization. So, you know, a university is located in a particular state, and the approval of that state, the approval and authorization of that state is a prerequisite to entering the accreditation process. And then, on the other end, the Federal Department of Education oversees all of the private accrediting organizations. So the accrediting organizations have to themselves be accredited with the federal DOE. So the federal DOE kind of sets the basic standards, which then are implemented and sort of policed by the accrediting bodies. So there are a couple things that this means. One thing, and again, this is another thing that a lot of people sort of misunderstand, or rather, okay, it used to be, so you may have heard of, there's many schools have regional accreditation, and there are also national accreditors. That used to make a difference. There used to be a big difference. The regional accreditation was always the primary standard for accrediting. That is no longer true under the new circumstances of how accreditors operate. Now, all accrediting bodies, regional and national alike, are under exactly the same jurisdiction and have to meet exactly the same standards. So there's no longer really any difference between regional and national accreditation. That distinction is no longer true. Here's the question I used to get asked all the time whenever I would talk about like how Signum is going through the process of working to become accredited, of applying for accreditation. People would say, well, why didn't you get accredited first? I mean, like, obviously you want to have accreditation when you begin a school, right? I mean, like, people always talk to me like that, like as if I like, oh, you're right, I should have just like gotten accredited first. What was I thinking? But it's not how it works at all. Accreditation is the certification of a thing that exists. That is, first you have to have a program. First you have to have a school. First you have to have students. You have to have had students and been graduating students for 5 years before you can even begin to apply, right? That's how accreditation works. So it's actually impossible and illegal to begin by having accreditation. It would be illegal to grant anyone accreditation before, according to the way things work right now, before they had been in operation. So you're required to have been running a program for a minimum of 5 years before you can even begin the application process for that. So yes, so it is a really challenging road when you're, like Signum, a totally brand new startup grassroots organization like we are and have always been, because it means you have to establish yourself from scratch and get rolling and stay rolling for many years before you can even begin the process, which itself then takes many years and a lot of additional resources on top of that. So it's been a long haul. Now let's talk for a second about why does accreditation matter? What are the benefits of accreditation? Like, why bother? I mean, if you have to exist without accreditation to begin with, why bother going through the process at all? And one thing to note is that accreditation does not affect all of Signum University's programs. Our space program, for instance, our adult continuing education program, is not affected by our accreditation. And should we be granted accreditation at some point in the future, that accreditation would not itself sort of apply to, like, our space program is not being evaluated as part of the accreditation process. It's our degree programs and degree level programs that are being evaluated. I should also add, by the way, though I'm happy to take questions and explain what I can, I won't be able to answer every question. And Miss Mouse, you have asked one of the very first questions that I cannot answer, and that is, what organization are we applying to for accreditation? I can't tell you that. I'm strictly forbidden from telling you that for reasons that make sense. The reason, of course, is because it would be inappropriate for us to, like, associate ourselves with this organization, you know, in the public view until we've become a member, until we've been accepted. So we're not allowed to talk about that. So I can't tell you that, which always feels weird to me. It feels weird to me to be all, like, cagey and secret about things, but I understand the principles behind why. But it means there are going to be several questions I might awkwardly not be able to answer that you have for this. Anyway, however, as I said, although accreditation doesn't apply to every program that we do, to degree and degree level programs. So for us in our current setup, it's primarily our master's degree and graduate diploma programs that are under evaluation for accreditation right now. Achieving accredited status is a prerequisite to a lot of things. There'll be a great number of things that will become open to us, which simply require accreditation as a prerequisite. For instance, high school teachers. So many high school teachers are required to do continuing education courses, to take courses in their field in order to sort of maintain their certification and stuff. Our courses in most places have not been able to be accepted by school districts and stuff because they have a blanket rule that says you can only do it through an accredited institution. So that means that should we achieve accreditation, at the end of this process, it means that high school teachers would be able to take Signum courses and have them count, have them count for continuing education. That's pretty cool. So that's one thing for which accreditation is a prerequisite. Another thing, use of the GI Bill, right? So this has been a question we've been asked many times by U.S. Army veterans of all of our armed services, who have GI Bill money that they want to spend on higher education and would love to spend that at Signum. That is awesome. We would love to have them, but in general, again, the GI Bill won't pay for the tuition unless it's at an accredited institution. So that's another thing. We would qualify for use of GI Bill funds from veterans who would like to study with us. Another big thing, and this is complicated, so I'll try not to get into too big of a rabbit hole explaining this, but about half of the states in America will not allow the students who live in those states to study in other states. Or rather, let's see. Let me see if I can explain it again. Okay, I'll tell the story. I'll tell the story as briefly as I can. But I'll tell the story. When online education began to be a thing, there was a fundamental legal question that had to be settled. And that is, when somebody attends an online university, what's happening there? Right? Because the university is in one place and the student is one place. So for the sake of state government oversight, what is occurring? Is the student telecommuting to the state where the school is located? Is that what's happening? So that, it's as if the student picked up and went to that state, but they're doing it from home, right? Is that what's going on? Or is it that the school is coming into the state and setting up a little branch campus in the home of the individual person who is taking the online course? Which of those two things is the better description, do you think, of the online situation? So, the state governments came to the decision, very many of them, in fact, most of them, came to the decision that what was actually happening was the latter, right? When a student is taking an online course, that means that the institution with whom they are taking the course has established a de facto branch campus within the home of that individual, and therefore any institution that wants to offer courses to students that live in that state have to be authorized by the state, each individual one of the 50 states. This was set up initially, frankly, as a barrier to entry. This was set up back when a lot of people were concerned about, shyster online universities, basically. It was a reflection of deep distrust of online education back in the day. When online education went mainstream, and almost every major university in almost every state was doing it, they all quickly decided, oh, this is not okay, right? We cannot afford the time or the money to go through the process of authorizing ourselves in every single state, right? So the states got together and formed what is called SARA, S-A-R-A, the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, where they came to the comparatively sensible arrangement that if a school has achieved authorization in its home state, that authorization will apply to every other state. There are, of the 50 American states, 49 currently have signed on to the SARA agreement. Would you like to guess which one of our 50 states does not go along with this? The one state which is the exception? I will allow you to guess. But a lot of people guess Texas. That's a good guess. That is not correct. That is not correct. No, it's not Texas. It's not Texas. Not Florida either. No. Correct answer? California. California is the one. But actually, fortunately, Californians themselves, they actually have a pretty generous policy in place for this. So California is not actually a big problem, even though they don't sign on to this. However, there's one problem. The problem is accreditation is a prerequisite for membership in SARA. So large state universities that have massive amounts of money are exempt from going through this onerous and extremely costly process of trying to authorize themselves in all 50 states. But new startup universities, I don't know, maybe who might at some point provide competition for existing universities, are not, in fact, allowed to sign on to the state authorization reciprocity agreement. And so yes, only rich established schools can qualify, new ones can't. That's the way it works. So one of the major benefits is that we can, again, now, since that time, about half of the states in America have rescinded those laws, and that's no longer a requirement, but about half of them still have them. That means in our current state, we can't accept people to our MA program and our graduate diploma program from about half of the states in the country. I'm so looking forward to being able to sign on to the SARA agreement and being able to accept everybody from all 50 states in America again. That will be a huge, huge benefit. Should the day come that we receive accreditation. Brian says, on that note, hi from Michigan. Hi, Michigan. Yes, do say hi to our friends in Michigan. Michigan, we love you. Most of the time, we love you. But yes, Brian, of course, you're absolutely right. Michigan is one of those states, unfortunately. More benefits of being accredited. Also, transfer of credits, right? So the ease of transferring credits from one school to another, this is greatly accommodated by accredited status, so that students who are enrolled at another school can take a course at Signum and transfer it in. This is going to be enormously useful for a lot of graduate students. There are many. For instance, there are a lot of people who are studying in medieval graduate programs who don't have the opportunity to take some of the courses that we offer at Signum. Want to brush up on your Old Norse or maybe your Old Saxon or something like that? We offer that. Not everybody does. So there are lots of places, not to mention the fact that there are a lot of people. Let's be blunt. The Tolkien Studies departments of a large number of university English and literature programs are frankly lacking, right? We have some things to offer there. So anyway, that's going to be a big benefit, to be able to, again, not just, for us, but for everybody, for us to be able to enable students to transfer credits out of Signum much more readily. But you know what else? You know what else is going to be a major benefit of being accredited? What is a major benefit of being accredited? Foundation funding. So this is something that, again, this is another sort of question or suggestion I've gotten quite a lot. And that is people saying, hey, there are a bunch of foundations that support innovations in education, several very prominent foundations. You guys seem perfect candidates we at Signum, we've been innovating for 12 years. We've been way ahead of the curve. We're doing a lot of really, really cool and interesting things at Signum. Wouldn't some of those wealthy foundations who, give large amounts of money to support innovation like this, wouldn't they be interested in that? And the answer is, not until you're accredited, apparently. We tried that. We talked to several foundation folks years ago, and we were told repeatedly, you don't qualify until you're accredited. This I found extremely frustrating, of course, because I was like, well, that you have to exist for like 10 years at least before you can be accredited. And so if you're wanting to support like new innovations, maybe coming in with support in those first 10 years might be a great way to help innovative new things get started, right? But nevertheless, yes, the idea that you can get support as an innovator once you become part of the status quo, once you gain acceptance by the status quo, it's a different way, right, of thinking about it. But again, on the other hand, I understand. I get it. But again, this is another big deal. We will be able to go back to the foundations and say, hey, it's been 10 years. Remember us? We're still here. And, we are doing all these exciting things. And by the way, we're accredited now. So let's talk. So that's certainly something I'm really looking forward to doing. All right, so that's kind of a background in sort of what's going on here. Let's talk about the process. So we, of course, are based in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is where I live. That's where Signum is officially based. This process all began back in 2018 in the state of New Hampshire, and there were lots of firsts going on there. Meow Indeed says, "Please don't die." You know, the state slogan of New Hampshire, "Live Free or Die," which is really on the top list of most metal state slogans, I think, in America. But it's a very active motto in the state of New Hampshire. But it isn't actually threatening the death either of ourselves or others, primarily. But anyway, yeah, people have often teased me about being in New Hampshire, the state that mentions death on the license plate. Anyway, as I say, in 2018, this was the year for a lot of firsts for us. The first time that we were presenting Signum and who we are and what we do to the educational establishment. The first time we were really coming under review like that. And we assembled our first document. We, the documentation where you go through and show, explain all of how the institution works and show how you meet the standards that they've established and stuff. And, we had long discussions with the folks from the state, really productive discussions. They've been so helpful over the years. And it was really great. We passed, we were approved by the Higher Education Commission of the state of New Hampshire. And it's interesting, like April 2018 was not only a lot of firsts for us, it was a lot of firsts actually for the state of New Hampshire too. There were a lot of ways in which Signum really kind of broke new ground in the state of New Hampshire. We were the first brand new institution, not like an external institution who wanted to come in and start a branch here in New Hampshire, but truly new from scratch university. We were the first one of those in a long time. In the active memory of most of the people who were on the commission, and I just met with some of the folks from the New Hampshire Higher Education Commission a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about how in the years since, there have been other online programs, other things which have basically been kind of following in our footsteps, and many times when they have found themselves to be prepared for evaluating certain things or talking about certain situations because they worked them out with us originally. So yeah, there were we kind of broke some of the paradigms in the state of New Hampshire, and it was good. It was, and I said they were so helpful, and it was I didn't know what to expect when we went into that process for the first time. You never really know. But I found them to be so collegial and so constructive, so helpful. There are a lot of requirements. There are a lot of things that they required. We have had and still are having to work really hard to, to meet all their standards and everything. But as I say, they've been very helpful and an enormous resource. Over the course of, in the couple of years since then, we've done lots of work following up on they had a list of recommendations of things they wanted to see us do as we moved forward, with the approval of the state. Included, of course, here was the memorable process of sponsoring a bill in the New Hampshire state legislature. Many of you will remember some elements, at least, of that particular saga, where we actually had to propose, we had to get a bill passed through the state legislature that basically officially recognized and authorized Signum as a New Hampshire state not as a state university, but as a university, acknowledged by the state of New Hampshire. And that political process, a fascinating experience. It was so fascinating that I don't want to talk about it much more, but of course, the marvelous thing was it did culminate in the signing of Bill HB 513/2021 into law by Governor Sununu there in Concord, New Hampshire, with this pen that I still have in my drawer right here next to me. So yes, July of 2021, the bill was finally signed into law, and there we were. Yeah, so the state process was really was really something, but that was just the first stage, right? The next stage after that is application for accreditation. So this is the beginning. That's the beginning of a very long process, right? You have a flag signed by his dad. All right, no, that makes sense. Yeah, good old Sununu Senior. I remember him from when I was a kid. Anyway, yeah, okay. So on August 31st, 2020, so almost 3 years ago, we submitted our first application. We officially submitted our application for accreditation. And again, it's a long process. We spent the rest of 2020 going back and forth on the initial application materials, to demonstrate that we qualified to apply. And then we spent all of 2021 and 2022 going through the initial evaluation process. This is a full evaluation. We have to gather and submit all the required documents and prove that we meet 100% of their standards, the standards required for accreditation. We went through 3 rounds of that evaluation in a little less than 2 years, culminating in an all-day virtual meeting at the end of October 2022. So that first stage was a long and challenging process, and at the end of it, we were approved to move on to the final stage of accreditation, which means 2 more reviews. So the last stages, which started then late in 2022 and has taken all of 2023 so far, there are 2 things that we do. One is what's called a curriculum review, which is a rigorous review of all of our courses and academic policies and procedures and everything by a panel of educational experts, and that was submitted in March of this year, and we're completing further documentation for them right now. So we're still heavily in the middle of that process, and we also submitted the final draft of our materials, hundreds and hundreds of pages of institutional information and documentation, and that was just submitted. Earlier this month, here in August this month, and that means there is 1 step left. Well, 1 step left with a little asterisk next to it. Asterisk. There could be additional steps under certain circumstances, right? But the last big thing, right? The last big thing that is happening is the site visit. The site visit evaluation. Now, this is, So the site visit evaluation. First of all, a lot of people they always ask, like, how can you have a site visit if you don't have a site, right? Which is indeed, you'd think, a logistical challenge, but actually it's not as much as you might think. Here again, the folks in the state of New Hampshire are really helpful. We're actually hosting so normally, of course, the accreditation site visit is when the final evaluation team comes to your campus, right? And they see your campus and they meet everybody. We're doing sort of a version of that. We just don't have a campus. That's part of Signum's vision, right? Is not having a physical campus, which physical campuses cost lots and lots of money and are a huge part of the reason for high tuition prices. So we don't have a campus on purpose, quite on purpose. But our friends in the state of New Hampshire are going to be hosting the visit. So the accreditation folks are coming to Concord, New Hampshire, which is the capital of New Hampshire. And the meetings are going to be hosted at the Department of Education offices there. And we're going to be, a bunch of the Signum folks, administrators and faculty and everybody else, some students and everybody are coming in. And we're going to be meeting with them in person. Some people will be meeting remotely as well, and it's going to be cool. So we're going to have a really fun day where we sit down and we answer questions and we talk about all of this stuff. Anything they want to talk about Signum, to try to help them to come to get to know us better and to understand who we are and what we're about, because it's really hard in a lot of ways. It's really hard to get that from just reading the kind of documentation that we have to submit, right? So I'm really looking forward to getting to sit down and get to meet with them and talk with them and let them get to know us and to meet us and to and all that stuff. So, but this is it. This is happening in a little, just right about 3 weeks. And right about 3 weeks, we're going to be doing the site visit in Concord. This process, which has been, an actively unfolding process since 2018, when we did our first submission to the state of New Hampshire, is going to be is going to come to an end. And of course, the process that we were then preparing the way for and getting set up for and prepared for 5 more years before that, right? So we're really coming to the end of something we've been working towards through the entire now 12-year history of Signum University. And that's going to come to its sort of climax in 3 weeks. So that's what's going on. Now, let me make sure that one thing is really clear. We don't know what's going to happen here, right? Like, I have no idea what the outcomes are. It's possible that they'll recommend that we are approved for accreditation, in which case the commission, which is kind of like the board of directors or whatever, like the decision-making body, right, of the accreditation commission, will vote on that recommendation at their next meeting. And if they vote to follow that recommendation and approve us, then we will officially be accredited. So that's kind of how the tail end of that process works. That would, by the way, undoubtedly be accompanied by a list of things that they'll require us to do over the next 3 years of additional improvements and things that they want to see from us. That's how these things work, right? So that's one possibility. It's possible that they will recommend us for accreditation or some kind of provisional acceptance, pending our satisfaction of certain qualifications and all these other things, right? That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they'll defer. And they'll tell us they want us to go through either to submit more documentation or to go through even another round of evaluation. That's possible. Like, it's possible that the process could extend a little bit further. We don't know, in which case it would take a little bit longer, but we would still be working towards that same end. It's also possible that they'll recommend that we be rejected. We have no idea. And I cannot make any guarantees about what the outcome is going to be. And I want to make sure that that's really clear. I don't want me talking about this in this process. Again, as especially those of you who've been around for a while know, I've been wanting to be transparent about this process from the beginning. Sometimes like the kind of traditional way to handle this is just not even to refer to it at all, and kind of let it happen behind the scenes and then just like blow the trumpets when the final process is over. But Signum is different. Signum has been, we've really been a grassroots organization from the beginning. And I've always wanted to be able to share with you guys what's going on. And I'm really proud of all the work that we have done. And all the great work that's been done to get us to this point. So, I I'm, whatever happens, I'm going to be proud of us and all the work that we've done here. But in any case, we'll see. We will see what comes up, and we've come to the last leg, the last stretch of this particular race. Now, the so JJ says, nor do any of us see clearly. It is true that if these educators understood the paperwork, they would not dare to apply, but they would still wish to apply, or wish that they dared, and be shamed and unhappy. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. Yes, exactly. Very good, JJ. Yeah, that's exactly it. This process, of course, is also a really demanding process, not just in time and effort, as we've been doing, but also in money. And this is something I've talked about at various points in the past. Back in April 2018, when we were preparing to submit our documentation to the state of New Hampshire, and we underwent that review in, I think it was June, July, and then it was in August that the commission had their initial meeting on that, back in 2018. So in April 2018, I made a fundraising appeal because there was large fees that we had to pay. We had to pay a $10,000 fee even just to submit the application right before even anything else began, that was, even back then, that was especially a great deal, a great deal of money. But I did a fundraising appeal back then. We needed $15,000 clear in order to just be able to pay the basic fees that we needed in order to go through the New Hampshire evaluation process. And in the end, you guys gave over $35,000 that month, and that was fantastic. With the money that we raised back then, we paid for the whole New Hampshire evaluation process. We still had enough left over that we had been saving from that to pay our initial accreditation fee to start this process. Since then, of course, over the course of the last few years, we've had to pay thousands more. Every time we submit a draft, every point along the way, we have to pay, a multi-$1,000 fee in order to keep moving through the process. And then, again, more for the curriculum review. And now we're coming up to the site visit, which is another, 5-figure cost for the site visit by itself. It's been, we've spent everything we raised in 2018 and a good deal more in time past for that. For now, to get us through the rest of this process, through the site visit and all of the prep and the work, because we also have to bring some of our people in to travel in to be able to be there for the site visit and stuff like that. And then there's going to be stuff after this as well that we're still going to have to do. Not to mention even things like paying our membership fee for Sarah, the state authorization thing that I was explaining before. And then, of course, even after that, even should we be accepted, there's the Sarah membership fee becomes an annual fee, and they're both annual fees and annual dues, which are a percentage of our tuition take, which we owe to the accrediting body for continued membership. So we're going to need to make sure that we have enough money not only to finish the process, but to be there when we're done. What we need is about $25,000. If we can raise $25,000 clear here this month, over the course of the next few weeks, we'll have everything we need to get us through the end of this process. Something like the $35,000 to $40,000 that we raised 5 years ago would be a huge blessing right now, but $25,000 will pay the bills and do the job. As you guys know, I don't usually make special appeals like this. I'm I don't yeah, I don't normally do this. And the fact is, our community, you guys are tremendously generous every year. For the last couple of years, we've consistently raised at or above $100,000 annually for our annual fund. That is awesome. You guys have been so generous, and we have been so grateful for that. It was funny. When I was talking to the New Hampshire folks, when I was talking to the Higher Education Commission folks a couple of weeks ago, they commented on that. I mean, I had given them like our financial statements and some other stuff that they had been asking about, and they were looking through it, and they were like, "You guys raised $100,000? You know, just like crowdfunding, $100,000?" I'm like, "Yeah, we totally did. That's exactly this." And he was surprised. He was like, "I'm really like, it's like this seems disproportionately high for an institution, you know, like of your size, right?" And I'm like, yeah, because our people are awesome, right? I mean, it's just been fantastic the way that you guys have supported us over the years. And of course, like, we still need the annual fund, right? It's not going to, unfortunately, it's not going to do us any long-term good if folks divert giving that normally goes to the annual fund, right, to this appeal. Like we're going to need our annual fund as usual this year too. All of these credentialing expenses are really they're just above, you know, above and beyond our normal operating expenses. You know, and I'll talk about the annual fund more in November during our, you know, the usual fall fundraising campaign, and I'll do our you know, webathon at the end of my State of the University address and all that kind of stuff. The annual fund actually is already looking great this year so far. The regular monthly giving that we have already in place and stuff, again, you guys are phenomenal. But this is a special occasion and a special expense, and you know, just like 5 years ago, in that way. You know, last time your generosity enabled us to start this process, and this time your generosity will get us across the finish line one way or another. We don't know if we're going to win the race, but we will get across the finish line, and that's pretty exciting. I have a special donation form. If you want to give through our normal donation form, that's totally fine, of course. I've created a special form, signumuniversity.com. Oh my gosh, holy cow, what's wrong with me? .org, for crying out loud. How did I even write that? How bizarre. Sorry. Fixing my own slides in real time. signumuniversity.org/credential is the webpage you can go to. Also a webpage you can send other people to if you want to help to sort of spread the word and help us to get this done. We are, you know, Signum University, still looking to change the world. You know, we set out to show that you can have a university and you can offer awesome education. You can offer great classes and a marvelous student experience without the really high tuition fees. And we've done it. We've done it now for 12 years, and we are this close to establishing ourselves sort of firmly within the educational landscape, you know, here in America. So yeah, signumuniversity.org/credential. Again, that's the form, the donation form you can go to. Last time, sometimes people have asked, like, well, you know, how much, you know, how many gifts are you expecting? Like, how much, you know, how much should I give? Well, I mean, of course, as much as you can or as little as you can is, you know, that's, you know, sort of course, up to you. Last time, in 2018, when we did this, the average gift was around 100 or so. Yeah. JJ, what a great question. What would Signum University need for a .edu address? Accreditation. I should have put that on the page. That's one of the benefits, right? Yeah, you have to be accredited before you can get a .edu web address domain. So that is one of the things that we will certainly do. As I believe we will be, I believe we will become signum.edu when we get accredited, but we don't qualify for that until then. So. Yep. Forgot to mention that as one of the perks, but it is definitely one of the perks as well. Yeah, and I saw someone ask, what does this mean for accreditation in other countries? In other countries, there is much the sort of exchange of credits between countries, it's much more, much less formalized. There's much less of a sort of an overarching system. But in general, again, it's something that is going to be will make it a lot easier, especially for people who want to take courses with us and transfer them over. It'll still be a kind of a complicated process anytime you're trying to transfer American credits into another system. It's complicated, right? But it will be much less complicated than it would be when we are not accredited. Right now, international students coming to study with us is actually in its way a lot simpler. So yeah, that's pretty simple. And oh, by the way, we also don't charge like 2 or 3 times as much to international students as we do to American students, like so many American universities do. It's another thing we don't do at Signum. But anyway, yeah. So right, Mrs. Manrico is asking, are we looking she said, I know colleges with up to 3 accreditations. Are we looking at garnering more after this first one? Well, so you're asking, like, when we have 1 accreditation, but what about second accreditations? Yeah, that is possible. I have no immediate plans for that. There are several reasons why schools get multiple accreditations, and those are usually when there are multiple. Like there will be particular areas that they need, so it's normally the accreditations are not simply, I don't want to say redundant, but basically like interchangeable completely. Sometimes that kind of thing, you can see that sort of thing. But more commonly, it will be accrediting organizations in like slightly different fields, and sometimes radically different fields. And that's usually a product of the kinds of programs that that an institution will begin. So, for instance, like if we were to start, say, a nursing program or something like that, it would probably behoove us, right, to get an additional accreditation to sort of work with that, right? No plans, by the way. Nope, we're not starting a nursing program at Signum University. But anyway, but that's why, because Signum is really focused in a particular niche, and our niche is humanities, and we don't mean to change that. We have no plans in the short or medium term to change our focus on the humanities. And so therefore, for that reason, there's going to be less need for us to kind of diversify our accreditation in that way. But it's definitely, I'm kind of open to it. I have to admit, it's 3 weeks before our site visit is not the time that I'm really prepared to be thinking about doing this process again with other people as well. But yeah. Dormouse, great question. When you add an undergraduate program, would your first accreditation apply, or would you have to go through the process again? And again, now, Dormouse, again, I would first start off by repeating, we don't have it yet, right? But I understand. Should we be accepted for institutional accreditation here, what would happen? So what would happen is it's not the same process again. There is a sort of a higher threshold initial process for institutional accreditation. Like once Signum University becomes a member of a particular accreditation, organization, there are still processes by which those any new programs we wanted to introduce have to be reviewed and approved by the accrediting body in order for them to be, kind of encompassed within the umbrella of our accreditation. So, so there is an additional process, but it's not the same process. But there is an additional process whereby we would have to submit any other degree program that we wanted to institute. An undergraduate program is something we're very, very much interested in doing. There may be other graduate programs that we are interested in introducing. That's finally a conversation we will be ready to have once we complete this process. So, yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Any other questions that people have that that I can answer about this? Yeah, this has been. It is frankly surreal to be coming to the end of this process. I mean, I'm sure many of you have undergone things in your life, right? That processes which take so long, so many years, that it begins like the process itself begins to feel like a way of life, right? And yeah, it's sort of feels like that, right? It's hard for me to imagine the world in which we have completed the accreditation process, right? So we will see. Deadlines, yeah. So as soon as possible. Site visit fees are due very soon. Some of the fees are later than that. If we could, I would love to have if we could have the $25,000 before the end of September, that would be great. Again, we don't have to have all of it within the next 3 weeks. It would be great to have a bunch of it if possible. But yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal. Yes. We'll be, again, as I said, I'll be talking about our normal annual fund. We'll do our annual fund, our normal fall campaign for the annual fund in November, like we did last year. But yeah, don't the great processes never end? Don't know that I can get behind that particular parallel, JJ. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, yeah. So ideally, the end of September is when we're really hoping for as much support as we can get towards this final credentialing goal. There are so many ways. It's funny how sometimes a bunch of things all just seem to come together at once, right? Signum University, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the State of the University address in November, but Signum University, I've said this already to many people, but I believe that someday, when we look back on the history of Signum, 25 years from now, when we look back on the history of Signum University, I think that we're going to look at 2023 as the beginning of chapter 2 of the Signum University story. The accreditation is the accreditation process coming to its culmination here is a huge part of that. It's not the only part of that. There are a lot of ways in which Signum is becoming a grown-up institution here this year, and it's been a very interesting, a very exciting time. But this is a big part of it. This is a big part of it. All right. No, April, we don't really have a historian or archivist. I mean, other than me, and there are a bunch of people. I mean, the one thing that we do have, fortunately, is a number of people who have been involved with us from the very, very beginning. So we don't have a historian or archivist, but when we get a historian or archivist, there will be many people who can give some really good testimony there. If you are interested in applying, April, we could talk about that. Yeah. But yes, and it is certainly true, as someone was asking. Should we achieve accreditation, there will, of course, be continual reviews. Like, the way that it works is that the first review would come up in 3 years, right? So we'd be reviewed again in 3 years, the same pretty much the same process. Not exactly the same process, but we would undergo a full review again in 3 years. And then after that, I don't know, 10 years is a common gap. Every institute, every university in America undergoes a review at least once every 10 years. It may be 5 years for a while. I mean, often it's common that when you begin, when you first receive accreditation, you undergo reviews more frequently, and then they kind of spread out over time. So yes, even should this initial application be successful, there will be much more to come after that. So in some sense, JJ, this process won't ever end. In fact, so I guess I can console myself with that, can't I? Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, so thanks everybody. There's other stuff coming up. I mean, I can one other thing that I can tease is that pretty soon I'm going to do another update event where I talk about a really exciting new thing that we're doing. I talked about at Summit Mythmoot. There's going to be it relates to the Signum Press and the Signum Studios as well. There's going to be a really, really fun a really fun opportunity for folks to be involved in Signum stuff, to get some of the awesome content that we're producing there and also be involved in that as well. Really, really exciting stuff that I can't wait to tell you guys more about when the time is ripe, but the time is not yet quite ripe for that. So that'll be happening. Well, I'll be talking with you guys again, probably in a month or two about that. We'll see. I'll let you know exactly when. And then there'll be more to talk about when we come to the State of the University address in November. So yeah, very good. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining me. Thanks for your generosity and support over the years. One last story. I remember having a conversation with the New Hampshire folk back in 2018. And they knew we were really small. They knew we were a really small, grassroots startup. And, the guy who was the director of higher education at the time was telling me, it's like, it costs $10,000 to apply, right? And I was like, yeah, I know that. And he's like, is that gonna be a problem? And I'm like, well, it depends what you mean. If you mean, do I have that money right now? No, no, I don't. No, I don't. But I said, but I will. I'm not worried about it. I know that, our community has our backs. It's the one thing Signum has always had. We've always had you guys. We've always had our community. And sure enough, it was like a week later, I was bringing him a $10,000 check, and I was like, no problem. See, many times people have asked me, how did you start up a university with no startup funding at all? Like, that's not possible. And you start up a low-cost university, right? A university that was just premised upon low tuition fees, and you have survived only on those deliberately low tuition fees with no startup capital whatsoever. How is that even possible? And the answer is you guys, our community. What we've had, there are many assets that Signum has not had. There are many advantages. We didn't have a founding donor, right, who gave $10 million to start up. Almost every university's origin story begins there with the rich person who, gave a large gift of money to start up the university. That's where most stories begin. That's not where our story begins. Our story begins with you guys. It begins with our community. It begins with this group of people, coming together to study Tolkien and loving all this stuff. And excited to see more opportunities for learning come about. And I have every confidence in our institution and in our community. Thank you guys, as always, for your tremendous support. All right. I will be back with more later on. I'll tell you what I can when I can. But thanks again very much. Let me know if you have any questions, if you want to discuss any of this with anyone, if they're like, maybe there are you want to talk about making a larger donation. Maybe you want to talk about, particular sort of circumstances of a donation or something. Feel free to send an email to donate@signumu.org, and we can help you with whatever we need to do there. Thanks very much, everybody. Talk to you guys later. Bye now.